And that's why in June we concluded the new EU-Canada Security and Defence Partnership to advance Canada's participation in the European Security Initiative and Rearm Europe plan. This will give us better access to European defence partners for our needs, and it will give our defence suppliers greater opportunities to help supply Europe's needs. We are also in the process of creating a new defence procurement agency to move at pace to get our armed forces the equipment that they need when they need it. And our investments in defence will expand Canada's industrial capacity so we can equip Canadian armed forces using Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian critical minerals, Canadian cyber, and Canadian lumber. Canada's new government recognizes that our military infrastructure and equipment have aged, hindering our military preparedness. We recognize that only one of our 4 submarines is seaworthy, that less than half our maritime fleet and land vehicles are operational. So we're modernizing our military equipment and technology. We're building up our own defense and security industries and diversifying those international defense partnerships. With investments of over $9 billion this year, Canada will reach our 2% NATO pledge, 2% of GDP NATO pledge, half a decade before schedule. And we will further accelerate our investments in years to come. At the NATO summit earlier this year in The Hague, the Minister and I announced Canada's intention to meet the new defence investment pledge of 5% of annual GDP over the next decade, by 2035. And to put that into context, our total spending on defence and security will quadruple by the end of this decade relative to 2023-24 levels.
Today, Mark Carney just sent a message, not just to Canadians, but to the world. Speaking from CFB Trenton, he outlined a vision for Canada's security that marks a clear break from the past. For decades, Canada and United States defense strategy leaned heavily on each other. They were the ultimate security partners. But Carney's words today made it clear, in a world growing more dangerous and unpredictable, Canada must move from reliance to resilience. And that means charting our own course, building new alliances, and ensuring we can stand on our own when it matters most. He spoke of a dangerous and divided international order. Russia emboldened, China more assertive, the Arctic melting, and threats advancing at a speed we've never seen before. And then came the pivot, strengthening defense ties with Europe. The new EU-Canada Security and Defense Partnership means Canadian suppliers will help rearm Europe, and Europe will help Canada in return. This isn't just about new friends. It's about diversifying our alliances so that we're not caught in the crossfire of U.S. political moods. Remember, just days ago, President Donald Trump slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian goods. And Carney made it clear, those same Canadian materials, steel, aluminium, critical minerals, will now go into equipping our own forces. It's a masterstroke. A trade blow turned into a national security advantage.
We're living in an increasingly dangerous and divided world. The international order, built after the Second World War and reshaped following the Cold War, is under pressure. Russia is emboldened. China is more assertive. The long-held view that Canada's geographic location will protect us is becoming archaic. Our Arctic waters are increasingly open, and there have been rapid advances in cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum, and advanced missile capabilities. Climate change is making our country more vulnerable. The Arctic's melting. Our wildfires and floods are more frequent and devastating. And these are all threats to which the Canadian Armed Forces responds. The Canadian Forces keep our people and communities safe through major disasters. I'll give examples. This summer, Canadian Forces have helped communities in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec soon Newfoundland and Labrador, including already by safely evacuating over 6,000 Canadians. This week alone, Canadian Forces members, originally from CFB Trenton, airdropped life-saving humanitarian aid into Gaza.
For the armed forces, this speech was more than strategy. It was recognition. Years of service, often underfunded and overstretched, are finally being met with pay that matches the weight of the uniform. A 20% raise in starting pay for privates, significant boosts for officers, better allowances for deployments and family relocations, support for the trades that keep our forces running.
Canadians have always been proud of our armed forces and respect your unwavering dedication. But just as we have taken our security for granted for too long we have relied too heavily on that dedication of women and men who keep us secure. As the demands on our Canadian Armed Forces have increased, their resources and their salaries have not kept pace. And these are the men and women we trust to wear the maple leaf, the Canadian flag, and to risk their lives for it. Their pay, your pay, should reflect the weight of your responsibilities. In Halifax a few months ago, I shared our vision to rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in the Canadian Armed Forces in order to protect Canada's sovereignty, to bolster our industrial capacity and create new careers for our workers. And at that time, I committed that Canada's new government would raise the pay of all members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And today, with Minister McGuinty and with Deputy Millett, I'm proud to fulfill that commitment by announcing that all members of the Canadian Armed Forces will receive a pay raise. Specifically, there will be an 8% raise for colonels and above, a 13% raise for lieutenant colonels and below, and a 20% raise in starting pay for privates in the regular force. These increases will be retroactive to April 1st of this year. There'll be increases on top of base pay, putting more money in the pockets of everyone. We will also introduce a new military service pay benefit specifically tied to time in service, so that paychecks honor years in uniform. We will also introduce additional supports in the coming months for members preparing for combat and high-risk training, so they are paid fairly in addition for those intense commitments. We will make posting allowances fairer, based on how many times members have had to uproot their lives, the lives of their families, to protect ours. And will give more support when those moves take them far from their families. And if the members of the forces are called to serve here at home in a flood, a wildfire, or another disaster, we'll recognize that service with increased pay as well. And finally, we will target extra support to the critical trades where we need the personnel the most, so we can keep the Canadian Armed Forces ready at all times.
It's not just about soldiers. It's about families who pack up on short notice, kids who leave friends behind, and parents waiting for that safe return. Carney didn't just raise salaries. He acknowledged their sacrifice in a way we rarely see from political leaders.
These increases in pay and incentives will help us to revitalize and transform recruitment and retention, to bolster force readiness, and to ensure that members in uniform have the confidence and certainty that they need. At Canadian Armed Forces bases, like Trenton, service isn't an abstract ideal, it's a lived reality. And in that lived reality, behind every member in uniform, there's a family that serves right alongside them. Spouses who pack up the house on short notice, move across the country or around the world and build a new life from scratch. Kids who have to change schools and leave friends behind. Parents who spend holidays with an empty seat at the table, trusting the child they raised will make it home safely. So when we raise pay, we're not just recognizing the armed forces member, as important as that is, we're also helping to strengthen their families. Higher pay means greater financial resilience, more stability, more career choices for spouses, and more opportunities for their children to pursue their dreams.
Make no mistake, this is more than a budget item. It's a strategic repositioning. By investing in Canadian industries, by building ties with the EU, by aiming to hit NATO's 2% spending goal ahead of schedule and moving towards 5% by 2035, Carney is signaling that Canada will no longer take its security for granted and that it will no longer look towards Trump's United States for a safety net. This is resilience. This is about standing tall in a world that's getting rougher by the day and doing it with allies who value partnership, not punishment. The question now is whether this bold shift will hold when the pressure mounts. But today was the day Canada's military future took a sharp turn towards self-reliance. And before we wrap up, if you've enjoyed this breakdown and you want to keep up with the stories shaping Canada's future, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Canada Today is just shy of the 10,000 subscriber milestone, and your click could be the one that gets us there. Join the community, stay informed, and be part of the conversation.